All right, you're good to go.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share some strategies and sort of talk through what it's been like to adjust to a new normal. It's probably been challenging for everyone, but I think in different ways. And my hope is that this webinar will provide some opportunities to see how it's possible to reclaim that work-life balance that we used to have. Right now, lives are commingled and everything's on seemingly on top of each other or happening in the same space. And so my hope is that this brings some light and some good suggestions that you find useful. An overview of the presentation. There are 4 components that we're going to talk about today. And really, if it's possible, and I'm not sure how many folks will have present right now, but if it is possible, what I would like to be able to do is hear as much from you around some of these suggestions and sort of say that works for me, or ask a question so that we can really drive it home. I think a lot of the things that are in here are nuggets that you probably already know. But talking about them in context with other people and in conversation kind of helps drive them home or make them obvious in ways that maybe they weren't. So the 4 components are this new reality that we're dealing with. And then 3 aspects of kind of confronting that in a way that makes us feel more empowered and more peaceful. Dealing with time and space, understanding our priorities and productivity, and then ways that we can grow and develop through this process. I mean, it is an adjustment, and there is an opportunity to leave this with skills that we maybe didn't have as refined as we will when we exit on the other side. So our new reality. Our new reality, I think the first thing that should be okay for everyone to say is that this is very hard. And if you talk to your friends, or with family at home, or you talk to colleagues, or you read op-eds in any of the major newspapers, people talk about how much adjustment and the stress that this creates. And I think it's important for us to care enough about ourselves to recognize that, and to not have an expectation that this should just be super easy and we should be able to kind of adjust and there shouldn't be any challenge. And giving yourself a little grace there and being kind to yourself, I think, will go a long way, because this is very hard. Now, what makes it hard? Couple things. One, this is a very fluid situation. There's kind of no end in sight. So it's very difficult to understand, where are we in this process, and is there light at the end of the tunnel, because we're not really sure how long the tunnel is. There's no differentiation now between different components of our lives. Everything's happening in the same place. And that separation that we used to be able to experience is no longer there. We have limited control. A lot of these factors are outside of our influence. And so as a result, it creates stress, because there's things that we would like to be different, but they're not under our control. But at the same time, everyone's unique needs are unique. And by that, I mean, of all of the people on this webinar, we probably all wouldn't benefit the same way from any one strategy, because we're different people, because we have different needs, different preferences, different wants, different things bother us, different things please us. And so the hope is, again, that we kind of reactivate the knowledge that you already have, but pick some things and maybe motivate towards action so that you're able to create a more peaceful, more productive work environment. So just some suggestions going forward, and I'm curious if anyone's been able to do any of these things. I mean, really focusing on taking care of you. And why taking care of you? It's like if we were ever to get back on an airplane, the idea of putting your mask on first before you help others. And really, if we're not in good places ourselves, it's very hard for us to take care of friends, family, colleagues. If we're managers or supervisors, it's difficult. So these are 4 things that I suggest as aspects to focus on that promote your well-being. And I'm just curious if any of these resonate more with folks that are present. I mean, resting and exercise is important, and as is nutrition. And both have been very complicated by our environment. Media exposure, I find, can be exceedingly stressful if it's available to you all day long, because it seems like, every time you hear a new story, it's something that's worse. And then finally, just reflecting and adjusting and saying, this made me feel a certain way, or I ran today, or I walked today. And really, I noticed that my mood was better. So anybody done any of these things? Yeah, Eugene?
So my wife and I like to walk around our development a lot.
Hmm.
So it's almost a mile track just around our whole entire development. And just getting sunshine, fresh air, I think that goes a long, long, long way.
You're so
Like just
right.
to get out of the house, just during lunchtime, just take a walk and get fresh air. Even if you don't take a walk, just go outside, sit on your patio, just get fresh air
Yep, you're right.
and
That's
get that sunlight, vitamin
it.
D.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because later in the slide, that's a big recommendation. Access to natural light is very important. And so I think that's a great suggestion, to just go outside at any point. If you can do it at lunch, in the morning, in the afternoon. Great. Thank you. Okay. So I also want to provide some encouragement, and I want to confirm for you that you can do this and we will get through this. Seems very difficult at times, but with each day we're getting more experience and we're getting better at managing our own environments. Two things I would suggest: one, being intentional, and two, creating structure. So intentional, when I refer to that, I think sometimes we have new freedoms and flexibilities, and Eugene, your example was sort of spot on with this. You can now walk outside at lunchtime or any other time. You can sit on your patio, which is something you couldn't do when you were at work in the office, right? Maybe it's not as easy to walk outside for everyone. And so now, if you're in an environment that you have a new freedom or flexibility, it's great to take advantage of that in a way that helps you. And then try to recreate some structures from the office that you used to have. So an example of this would be, was there someone that you used to have coffee with at 10 a.m. on Tuesdays? And if there was, and you miss doing that, maybe you put on your calendar that you're going to call that person or do a Zoom call with that person, and you're going to connect with them. And so some of those structures that you had, you can try to recreate now in your home environment. And then finally, this can go either way. If you want to feel a certain way, a little trick is to dress according to how you want to feel. And so your clothes really do influence your mindset. And some days it's okay to be in your athletic gear if that's how you want to feel. But if you notice that you want to feel a little bit more productive, and when you put on certain clothes, you seem to have a day where you felt more productive, just pay attention to that and be intentional about choosing what you put on to create the mindset that you want to be in for that day. Okay. Part two, the time and space. So two things we have to be able to get control of. One is time and the other is space. And they're seemingly, I don't know if you've heard the joke of like, I'm exiting the big weekend and going into the little weekend, because all the days seem to run together. And it's very, very hard. Like you wake up, you're like, what day is it? And then if you've had grocery deliveries recently, there's a new window. Remember before, the windows used to be like 8 to 9, 9 to 10, or 10 to 12, or 12 to 4, right? The last one I saw was somewhere between the 24th and the 26th, your groceries will come. So this concept of time and structuring time has really kind of gotten outside of what's normal and controllable for us. So these are great ways there's 2 slides with 4 tips. So if I could point attention to 2 slides in the deck, it would be this one and then 2 ahead of this, where there's really 4 tips. So in terms of getting control of your time, create a routine. It doesn't matter what that routine is. It's a routine that works for you. There's predictability in that. 2, chunk your time. Is anyone here better at writing in the morning than they are in the afternoon? Does anyone feel more social and want to have more conversations with others in the afternoon than they do when they first wake up before they've had their first cup of coffee? So think about how you chunk your time based on your own preferences and what works well for you. And now that we have some more flexibility, figure out how to make that work. 3, track your progress so that you can feel accomplished, and there's no right way to do that, but just at the end of the day, you have a product or you have a list of things, say, wow, I checked off everything on my list. Not because you have to, because if you want to feel like you've accomplished something, that's a great way to produce that feeling. And then take breaks. Don't try to sit for 12 hours on end, because again, with this lack of sort of definition of time and differentiation between spaces, I think it might wind up being counterproductive. So on this next slide, it's a little bit more detail from the previous slide. And And a lot of the things we've talked about, and I wonder if anyone here has any suggestions or has tried anything to structure their time along these lines, whether it's a routine that you've created or how you block your time or how you sort of track what you've accomplished in a week.
So I can actually, when we first started the quarantine, I have my planner that I use no matter what when I was in the office. When we started quarantine, I'm like, well, why do I need it? Like,
yeah,
I don't know what to do. Well, then it drove me crazy for like the first 2 weeks. So now it is with me, and everything I do, I have to write it out. Otherwise, it's like, what did I do today?
Yeah. Do you feel better?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Because at first it was like, I feel useless.
Right. And that's the important part. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to write things down or to use their planner. It means if you can find a thing that allows you to feel you've accomplished something, practice that, right?
And then someone wrote set timers on your phone.
Yeah,
great. So then you know this time.
So yeah, that's a great idea. Okay. Okay, so now space. So time, we've gone over your space. Four kind of big ticket items here that are again on more detail in the next slide, but you need to define where you're going to do your work. If it's a constantly moving target in the house, you're really going to lose a sense of differentiation between where you're working and where you're actually at home. And over the long term, psychologically, that'll have an effect that's not positive. Then declutter. Once you've found the space where you're going to work, get rid of everything that you don't need that is there now, and put the things that you do. And then create structure. Where are your papers? Where are your folders? What is it that's around you? And if you want to get up and walk to somewhere, you put your files maybe over by the door so that you want to get up and get something, at least you have a reason to go walk, or you need to print something just like you do in the office and you walk to the printer. And then at the end of the day, think about how you close up your office. Because when each of us left our office before the quarantine, we did something, right? Think about what you did. You turned off your computer or you put it to sleep. You straightened the piles on your desk. You picked up random things. You picked up papers that you knew needed to either come home with you, or which that you shouldn't do. You should leave them right where they are. Don't move them. Right? But what's that routine? And then on Friday, think about how you can pack up everything and put it away. Because if you're working at your dining room table, maybe for Saturday and Sunday, you want to have the dining room table back for whatever, for the family to be there, for you to do a crafts project, right? But think about allowing that space to be reclaimed by your other aspects of your life. And where can that stuff go? So maybe it goes in a copy box and it goes in the closet. It doesn't have to be a very involved process to get rid of the things, but allow that space to come back to be what it was before you started working from home. Also very important is to think about the ergonomics and where you're sitting and whether you're supported. If there's light behind you, if there's access to fresh air, right? There are other things about you where your elbows are so that you're physically not creating an environment that's not healthy for you. So this is kind of what I was just talking about. The other thing that's kind of different is temperature. And at work, a lot of times people have environments that are either too hot or too cold. You can't really control it. One benefit of being at home is you can open your window when you want, or you can go outside. And you can also do sitting and standing. You know, a lot of times you see those desks that raise and lower. If you have a countertop in your kitchen and you want to sit there for some of the time and you want to also stand and type, that's a different way to make sure that your body's kind of getting that movement and you're not stuck in one place. And then just generally speaking, has anyone tried to do the image on the left? Where you're sitting on the floor, there's stuff everywhere, right? And it may feel good for a moment or an hour, but after 2 hours, your lower back starts to hurt. You can't find things. You know, it's a draining way of trying to be productive. And it's okay every once in a while if you need to take a break from where you're sitting. But really the image on the right is kind of what we're going for. And it's similar to the image behind Marianne, is that there's light behind her. And I don't know if there's plants, but you can see that her screen is at eye level where she's looking. Right, so this is this is a much more sustainable setup. So try to see the way that you can get your home office workspace to incorporate some of those recommended practices. Okay, so part 3, priorities and productivity. Now, we have to set realistic expectations. Some of the things that we were able to do before when we were in an office space with colleagues, it might not be possible to do those same things or the same volume of things or the same level of complexity. And that's, it's okay. It's a barrier, it's a limitation, it's a challenge. And when you name it explicitly, you can start to problem solve around it. 4 things that I think are kind of typical for everyone: interactions with people, technology, which we know can be helpful or not, the expectations that we have for ourselves and that others have and that we have for others, and then interruptions. So anyone with like little guys at home knows that they're not aware that they're doing something that we don't expect them to do or we don't want them to do at a particular point in time if they come into the room. And I think allowing for that, and hopefully there's, you know, management that's being much more flexible and understanding, but trying to figure out a way for helping you and helping others in your household manage the need to interrupt. So interactions, you can decide whether you have too many or not enough. Now, there's an argument for introverts and extroverts and how we're experiencing the quarantine differently. And you may have people in your home where one is an introvert and the other is an extrovert, or people in your office where, you know, some folks are really struggling because they haven't had that human interaction, and they're on your team and you can't tell why they feel or why they seem a little bit more distant or sad, because maybe they're not getting enough interaction. And then you have other people that are like, I cannot be on another Zoom call today or I'm gonna go crazy, right? So figure out where you are. And again, as I said in the beginning, give yourself some grace and be kind to yourself to recognize that. And figure out how you can reorganize or restructure some of your experiences so that you're not getting too much and you're not getting enough. Technology, use all the tools that are available, but with that, know that the frustrations come when it works or it doesn't work. Consider your background all the time. I mean, it's you know, it's funny and it's cute, but depending on what kind of call it is, you really want to be aware of what you're projecting behind you. And if you haven't been on this before, you haven't had to operate this way, it's you know, it's not something you might think of. So no harm, no foul. Setting expectations and trying to create those workarounds like I talked about. And for everyone, it'll be different. I mean, if there's 2 people on the phone, I talked to a friend yesterday, both individuals in this relationship are working at home and they're both on like sales calls all day long. So can you imagine the volume of conversation that's going on in there? So figuring out like, when can I take my call, or when are you going to do your call, or what's your day like? And trying to make sure that we all have space to close our door and be able to, you know, and if I have to move it to tomorrow because the scheduling doesn't work with who's in my house, that's okay. And then controlling your interruptions. So they're really cute suggestions, some for kids, some for adults, but like you can put something outside your door that says like, you know, meeting in progress so somebody doesn't barge in. But if you don't put it there, they might not know. You can do funny things like, you know, put like a little, you know how they have that elf around, like the elf is watching the child, or a gnome or something. You can be funny about it. Oh, well, Batman's there, so, you know, we can't go into the room because Batman's there. The picture in the middle shows a child sliding a note to his mom under the door. It's a real example. It says, how long more? Like the little guy just wants to know when you coming out, right? And then there was one example where a mom had put outside, I'm busy right now. See if any of the following answers work for you. It's broken. It's in the dirty clothes. I don't know. Ask your father, right? So like a little levity and a little, again, grace with yourself and the circumstance, you can find ways to work around. This slide is not sort of, it's a little bit outside of what the focus of the presentation was supposed to be, because here I wanted to just provide us a slide that was helpful for people that had children at home. And if you're trying to be a teacher at the same time as you're trying to be a professional working in a difficult environment, 4 points just that you can consider. Kids really need structure and routine. And if you can plan out the resources and think about how you're going to use TV time or internet time, or how you can assign chores, or, you know, if you structure most of this, kids will be able to adapt more easily because it becomes predictable and there's a routine. They may not like it all like initially when you start, but really these are things that will help a child feel more secure and have a sense of predictability in their day. And when they have that, emotionally, they're going to be in a better place to respond to you as you parent. Okay, so growth and development. Any comments, questions so far? Any of that? All, it was all pretty straightforward, right? All things I think that everyone pretty much knows, but maybe hasn't activated in this context.
Yeah, so the only comment we have so far was just about using, for instance, the dining room table, and how now having a space has helped because then the family couldn't use the dining room table.
Right.
Marianne.
Can I talk?
Yep, you can talk. You're unmuted.
Okay. It took me all this time. Julia, you are so spot on everything. And I've been trying all this time to figure out how to raise my hand. This is tough. The technology thing is tough for me. However, like some of the things you said have helped me tremendously.
Good.
Managing news, so at first it was 24/7, right? I wanted to know everything. And then I was so depressed and so upset. And, it was just all consuming. So I now limit myself to once a day. And I figure I can get everything that I need once a day. And of course, our boss has been on top of this the whole time and has been feeding us information. So we really are getting absolutely every bit of up-to-date information. So that's a good thing. Getting dressed, that's my big thing. I've shared that with the staff before about getting up every day, putting your shoes on, getting dressed. It has helped me. But, and keeping track, I think that that's really important. Because I just think that at the end of the day, there's a couple things. First of all, it helps you feel successful. So success builds on success, correct? So we can all agree on that. So I think that that's good. The other thing is that I think that some days, and I'm sure this happens to you, it happens to me, you have a whole list. I make lists, right? I always have lists. Some days I look at the list and say, well, that was useless today. But what did I do? I did get all this other stuff done, even though I couldn't get this done.
Right.
And I have asked, so I supervise the staff. And so I've asked them to give me weekly progress reports. I'm not keeping tabs on anybody, and they all know I'm not that kind of a person. I'm not a keep tabs on you person, but it is to let you see what you're doing and to let me see and plan for the next week, because maybe next week there's a project that I could better, you could better utilize your time, and it would be more fulfilling to you if you were doing this rather than this. Yeah. So, I mean, you're like brilliant. How come before this?
I mean, I looked at a lot of things that were out there, and I listened to people when they talk. So I feel like a lot of this has come from people that I've worked with, and just to your point that you just said, asking your team for lists, it's not something maybe that the traditional work environment required you to do. You didn't have to ask. So now because you have trust with your employees, they understand, oh, you're just asking, but they might actually be helped by that little request, but they didn't know that they needed to do it because in the old environment, it wasn't necessary, right? Yeah. And that in this section is very important because some of us will have an opportunity to develop skills that allow us to work differently in the future. So this idea of managing communication and teams virtually, or planning and reporting progress, these are things that everyone who has not had to work in a virtual environment is just learning now. But if you look into these, if you read blogs, if you read articles, if you look for in project management methodology, there's a lot around virtual teams, file systems, and performance reporting. There's an opportunity to become really good at this and to become a more effective manager or a more effective employee, or to be able to show that when we go back to normal, maybe you don't have to come to the office 5 days a week. Now, because you're set up and you have this ability to work remotely in a way that integrates back into the traditional office, you're in a different position. So that optimism, I think, Marianne, and a manager that can promote that is, you know, a really, really powerful thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've done a great job. I mean, and I know your staff loves you. So
I don't know about that. But
that's what they say. That's what I'm hearing. Okay, so just to put a finer point on the management piece, you know, and this isn't a slide or a comment that's directed to managers or supervisors or to employees. What is true is when we see someone or someone comes and checks on us or someone hears a conversation we've had because they're in our environment, they're able to come around. Whether it's a colleague hears a colleague have a difficult phone conversation and they can check in and say, hey, how are you? You want to take a walk, right? Because they're present. Or a manager hears two people kind of having maybe a very productive conversation and goes over to congratulate both of them for, you know, really solving the problem effectively. Well, when we're not in the same physical space with each other, we don't have access to that opportunity to interact. And so that means that a call, an email, a text, something, being able to check in, having employees know that my manager is still there, someone's still here to help me, even though they're not seeing me every day. The employee reaching out, but the manager also being a little bit more proactive to kind of say, I'm still here. I know you didn't see you today. Or checking in with everyone at 10 a.m. every day and say, oh, you guys have a great day. Or at the end of the week, something to sign off. These are just little concrete things that remind people that we are still connected, even though we're not all physically present in the same place. Another thing that's always very important is to expect the unexpected. So if you go at this thinking that something's going to go off the rails, whether it's, you know, something that you do or something that a child does or something that happens around you or a family member or a friend or whatever, technology stops working or the electricity goes up, whatever, it's going to happen. And everyone knows that. And I think we have to figure out a way to allow ourselves to, you know, kind of deal with that and help other people when they're going through the unexpected as well. Okay, so this is the final slide and just, you know, some additional recommendations that I think, again, are obvious, but I mean, they're intuitive that you know this already, but maybe not obvious. So when you leave work, right, I mentioned about packing up your desk. What do? You put the computer to sleep, you organize your papers, you get something ready for the next day. And then most people leave the office and we would get in our cars. Some people would get on a bike and you would have a commute. And that commute gave you a period between home and work. So one thing that you might benefit from recreating is that part where you get to unwind, where you go for a walk. It's 5 o'clock, you close up, you leave and you go for a walk as if you were doing your commute. Because how do you allow yourself to unwind from one experience? Do you need to listen to music for 10 minutes? Do you need to look for a recipe and start making dinner? But how do you get out of that work mindset and really come home and be able to rest and relax and engage with people that are in your home on a different level? And I think being intentional about that and finding time if you need to meditate or to listen to classical music or to breathe or to let go of whatever happened today. When you're home already, it's not as obvious that there's an opportunity to do that. So just for your own well-being, and if you could recommend it to someone else, I think giving ourselves that period at the end of the day to decompress a little bit and find a new center will allow us to enjoy our home life a little bit more. So I would love to hear suggestions, feedback, questions, comments. Eugene?
So I essentially agree with everything, trying to keep the normalcy of routine, having your own office space, because that makes a big difference. I typically try to wear the clothes, I guess. I mean, I wear a suit and tie every day, but now I'm not going to wear a suit and tie for a Zoom call, but
Right.
I try to dress up a little bit to feel like a normal person. And then at the end of the day, once I change into like, I guess my home clothes, it makes a difference. Like now I know it's shut off. My brain's work mode is shut off.
Yeah.
And it just like, just the routine is key. Again, fresh air is key. And I'm an extrovert. So for me, it's really tough because I want to see my family. I want to interact with my friends. I want to go out to like a restaurant. I want to go to a bar, hang out with people, but it's difficult. But the routine portion is definitely helping for sure.
Great.
And what you wear is kind of huge.
Yeah. You've hit on a lot of excellent points. And like I said, I mean, the things I'm putting out there, the things that you've done a great job knowing those. Somehow you knew how to decide the things that would help create the balance, a little bit more of the balance and structure. So I applaud you. I think that's great. I like the home clothes too.
Yeah.
No, seriously, because you change the whole way.
Yeah, like Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
See, I never would have thought about, when you go home, like you're leaving the office, you're going home, like I get 25 minutes to myself before I come into a crazy house, where now, no, I'm just in the crazy house. So that's really, I never would have even thought of that.
Yeah.
Pause for 20 minutes, like I'm on my commute.
Right.
That's actually really interesting.
There's probably a bunch of stuff that's like part of our life that if we just step back a little bit and can get some perspective, that those nuggets are there. And I think if anything, I would just encourage folks to, what I said before, be intentional to create that structure. I mean, those two, that's probably could sum this all up in being intentionality and structure. And not everything is going to work the same way for each person because we're all different, and that's fine.
I know when we spoke, Julia, prior to this, I told you how excited I was because everything you said makes sense, and it just takes somebody else saying it for it to click. Like, oh, I really should try. Like,
Yep.
Right.
But for me, like I said, I made a comment about my dining room being off limits. Like, we're eating dinner at my coffee table in the living room. And I actually I put a bunch of stuff away, like in my bag of things that I know exactly where they are if I need to get them. And now everything at the end of the day just gets piled up, in one back half of the dining room table. And I have a hutch. And what I'll do is I'll just put that away, tomorrow night. And then I'm not so overwhelmed looking at it like, what else can I try? What else can I do? Other different little things. So if I put that away and, regain my control of the one thing that I do have inside of this house, I don't have control of anything that happens outside of this house. And I think that that's an internal struggle that a lot of people have.
Yeah. But I'm so happy that you did it because of, that's like golden right there.
That's big for me. For somebody who is not
an action. That's
totally
phenomenal.
organized.
And I'm glad that it's made a positive difference. That's great.
It
But
has.
you knew.
Everybody. I sent pictures. I said, you will not believe. Look at my FaceTime my mom, and she was like, oh my goodness. I know.
That's great. That's great.
So thank you for that.
Sure. No, I'm glad that it was helpful.
Yes. Very much appreciated.
And I think, I'm happy to make myself available to folks just to talk on the phone. I mean, this is what I do. I'm all about effectively organizing your time, prioritizing, being productive, figuring out how to get things done. And I learn a lot from those conversations. So anyone who just wants to ask a couple questions, I'm more than happy to just have that and be able to share maybe, something you tell me, I can tell someone else, and, we all benefit. So.
Yeah.
I think, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay. I think two things. One thing that Robin just brought up about the control. It is very funny that you cannot, you really have to just say, hey, whatever. You can't control what's going to happen. And that's everything. That's like Zoom meetings like this. You just don't really know what's going to happen. So you have to really kind of give up a little control because, we're usually the experts. We're the ones that are doing, we're orchestrating all these events, and we just don't ever know what's going to happen. So that's one thing that we learned. But Julia, your very first comment about be kind to yourself, really be kind to yourself, because every day is not going to be perfect. And we were overnight put into this situation. We were, we didn't have even a week to say, okay, so does everybody have everything that they need?
Right.
We had a staff meeting here on a Monday morning and said, okay, everybody, finish up what you have to finish up and go home and don't come back. So we, none of us had any, we're really flying just on a wing and a prayer, trying to figure this out. So I think that everybody needs to say, you know what, we can always get better, and we can always do this better and more efficiently. But for right now, today, let's be kind. I did a good job, right?
Yeah.
Caitlin and Robin and Mary, I don't know who else is on the phone that has children, but they're dealing with children, at home. So Eugene is dealing with, his wife who is working from home. Tracy, I know her husband goes out to work every day and her kids are there. So everybody's dealing with something else pretty big,
Right.
and trying to do this. So first of all, just be kind to yourself and give yourself a break every once in a while. But you said that very first, and I love that. Thank you for
Good.
that.
You should all be very proud of yourself and the support. I mean, not only, Marianne, everything you said, but you're supporting all of your chamber membership. So like, you're trying to take care of what you need to do, but at the same time, you're trying to support others. And it's a Herculean effort. And I know that I am very grateful for all the things that you've done and being connected and knowing that you're still there and that you really, the chamber's done a great job.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone? Any other comments? If not, you can always feel free to reach out to us at the chamber, or Julia if you do have any questions that you might think of later on. But if not, Julia, thank you once again.
My pleasure.
For coming on. We definitely really enjoyed it. This video is going to be posted. And then also make sure everyone keeps an eye out on our website. We have a lot more Zoom events like this coming up, but then we also have our social Zoom events, where it's a kickback, grab a glass of wine. We have Taco Tuesday coming up on Cinco de Mayo, so that's going to be a lot of fun. So just keep your eye out. This is our new normal for the time being, is seeing everyone via Zoom instead of in a ballroom having breakfast. So Robin and I, Marianne, everyone, we're working hard for these events. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a great meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Julia.
Bye.
Thanks, Julia. Hope to see you again.
Thanks
Better
so
go for a
much.
walk.